Period poverty, the bloody truth about menstrual hygiene access and education in the U.S. Margaret, a single mother of two, wants to buy some cough medicine for her daughters, along with some food at a nearby store. However, expenses are beginning to weigh on Margaret, who was laid off from her job due to the global pandemic. For months, as she struggled to budget for her family, weighing costs of food, clothes, and various other utilities, she has discovered that menstrual hygiene products are particularly difficult to cover. Period products for herself and her daughters get costly, and she must obtain them each and every month. Margaret and her daughters are experiencing period poverty, a phenomenon which, according to BMC Women's Health, is defined as a lack of access to menstrual products, education, hygiene facilities, waste management, or a combination of such factors. Most women, roughly between the ages of 11 and 55, menstruate. As of 2021, about 500 million people who menstruate lack access to such menstrual hygiene products, and nearly 17 million of those affected people live in the U.S. Further, those who are unable to afford such menstrual products such as pads and tampons are at risk of isolation, infection, and missed opportunities due to missing school or work. Therefore, one of the most important, yet often most neglected, poverty-related issue is that of period poverty, as its consequences delve far beyond a mere lack of resource. It wields vast social, educational, and health consequences for every single individual experiencing it. First of all, in order to gain perspective on the issue, one must look at how expensive menstrual hygiene products are. Prices of menstrual hygiene products vary depending on the brand, the store where one would purchase them, and other variables. On the CVS website, for example, a box of 32 pads costs around $10. While this might not seem too expensive at first, 32 pads might not be enough for the individual's full cycle. Furthermore, this is not a one-time cost. Anyone who is menstruating must keep purchasing menstrual hygiene products, most often around once a month, which is the average length between cycles. Thus, for this example, that individual who buys those particular pads from CVS might spend at the very least $120 per year. Even further, what if this individual happens to be a single mother, like Margaret, who has two daughters who are also in need of regular menstruation products? Or perhaps, what if the individual is a 19-year-old girl who doesn't yet have a steady job and thus might be unable to afford such products? There are a plethora of possibilities, but the scope of those affected by period poverty is massive. Furthermore, despite the fact that menstrual hygiene products are health necessities, 27 states still tax them, according to Period Equity. The tampon tax, a tax used for the tax imposed on menstrual hygiene products, deems such products as non-essential items, thus adding a greater burden on those necessary items. Period poverty often serves as a high barrier to education. Many may not understand such lengths to which access to menstrual products has on education. For example, if a student doesn't have sufficient menstrual products, then they may opt to skip school for the amount of time that they have their period. Such a situation wields vast consequences. As medical news today suggests, low attendance at school significantly affects an individual's future earning potential and self-esteem. Even if schools do have some form of menstrual products, say in the nurse's office, Damaris Peretta, the director of the nonprofit advocacy group Period, describes the situation as such. While you can get a period product, you often have to walk across the campus while you're still bleeding through. In that case, a lot of students feel ashamed and like they've lost some of their dignity. Furthermore, aside from the costs of menstrual products such as sanitary pads and tampons, the general public's perpetuated stigma regarding periods is one that is negative and leaves many students ashamed or embarrassed to attain the help they need while at school. Therefore, the lack of access to menstrual hygiene significantly affects education attainment, and thus should be made more of a priority when thinking of how to alleviate poverty. In addition to the various aforementioned educational barriers, individuals experiencing period poverty also face a plethora of health consequences and risks. If someone is unable to afford menstrual hygiene products, they may resort to using rags or toilet paper. Additionally, they might reuse certain products to avoid buying more. These alternatives often lead to negative and dangerous health risks. Particularly, such alternatives to purchasing more products leave the individual at an extremely high risk for a variety of infections, particularly urogenital infections. In addition to these severe physical health implications, an individual's mental health is also put at risk when experiencing period poverty. There exists a negative stigma associated with the general concept of menstruation, which may explain why period poverty tends to be overlooked in discussions of poverty and inequality. For example, there might exist the notion that menstruation is dirty and unnatural, when, in fact, it is completely natural and healthy. Furthermore, perhaps the stigma exists because people tend to think that menstruation is a women-only experience, when it's not. Not every woman menstruates, for example. Reasons for the stigma aside, the current lack of discussion and discourse regarding period poverty is deeply troubling. Individuals experiencing period poverty may be left with feelings such as shame, vulnerability, and exclusion, which can detrimentally affect their mental health. Overall, the tax on menstrual hygiene products, the affordability of such products, and general public knowledge on period poverty must be talked about more often and more inclusively. As period poverty wields a significant effect on educational and health barriers, it is evidently necessary to enact policies that make it easier for more people to access menstrual products. Despite the fact that there are currently few policies targeted at alleviating period poverty, the issue is garnering more traction and attention from policymakers. According to NPR, as of fall of 2021, only 5 states require schools to provide menstrual products, with California the latest to do so by implementing a policy that requires public schools and universities to supply pads, tampons, and other menstrual products in their restrooms. To such policies, some may retort with an understood, how would schools fund these products? For public schools and colleges, the funding would come from each school system's budget. For example, in June of 2021, the Madison Metropolitan School District set aside $200,000 to put period products into some bathrooms, with further funding anticipated in the next school year to outfit a bathroom at every school in the district with the products. While this may seem like a substantially expensive cost, the expenses for toilet paper are no different. Yet, toilet paper is still in universally every single public restroom. What's the difference? Various public institutions such as schools, prisons, and public restrooms must work on providing pads and tampons, because in failing to do so, they leave a large percentage of the population facing a public health issue with profound consequences: physical health risks, social effects, and psychological effects. Therefore, while the financial burden might be extreme, the benefits outweigh the costs. Some may say that simply supplying bathrooms with pads and tampons won't end period poverty. However, it's a policy that would exponentially alleviate the anxiety of trying to find a product when out in public. In addition to such policies, there are many other ways of addressing period poverty, including donating to charities, advocating for affordable menstrual products, and supporting organizations that provide menstrual hygiene information. Furthermore, policymakers must strive to enact policy change by making note of John Rawls's veil of ignorance. In other words, if you knew absolutely nothing about your race, sex, gender, or social standing, what kind of policies would you want to be implemented? While not realistically possible, this idea of thinking enables empathy, as you would be basing your ideas off of the goodness for everyone. So why should we ultimately care? The answer is simple. We will fail to alleviate poverty if people who menstruate around the world continue to lack access to menstrual hygiene products and menstrual hygiene education. When thinking of period poverty, we must remember Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s World House metaphor, or the idea that we all live together, and thus we should want to treat everyone like family. We all have an obligation to help those experiencing poverty, but in order to actually accomplish our goals, we must do so through joint effort. It is absolutely crucial to shift our attention towards alleviating period poverty, and we must destroy the stigmas that have been perpetuated around menstruation and menstruation equity. Put simply, menstrual hygiene products are basic necessities. The inability to obtain them vastly affects an individual's ability to remain healthy, study, and participate in a society with dignity.